Hello, this is Pat Bolmer, partner and co-founder at Halo Consulting, the certified minority-owned search firm that makes the experience of working with the process-oriented retained executive search firm accessible by leveraging a risk-free fee model. Today, I'm joined by Chris Quintero, multi-time entrepreneur and former venture capitalist, who is currently founder and CEO at Sourcing Sprints, a recruiting software startup that helps early-stage founders make their first hires. Chris, thank you for joining.
Thanks, Pat. Great to be here.
So I'll just dive right in. Where did you start your career and how has it evolved into starting your own company?
Yeah, sure. I really started my career in venture capital back in 2012. I got a start at a firm called Bolt, which at the time had launched a hardware accelerator. Over time, we evolved into more of a traditional venture fund. We raised three funds, about $120 million, and invested in 70 different companies, mostly at the pre seed and seed stage. I spent about 7 years there before leaving to take a bit of a sabbatical and then move here to Nigeria and found Sourcing Sprints.
Very cool. And can you tell us a little bit about your current company, Sourcing Sprints, and the product? Who's the user, the buyer, and who's your audience in general?
Yeah, sure. We work with very early stage founders, the earliest of stage founders, helping them hire their first few people. Typically, it's a co founding team that has just raised a round of capital and they need to make their first one or two hires. Our model is pretty different from how many firms work, where we don't talk to candidates. We're focused on helping founders get leverage and scale the outreach that they're doing to early stage talent. And so we'll go through a process with the founder to identify the right people that they should be speaking with, reaching out to those people through the founder's own email in a very high touch, personalized way. So then they can jump straight to 15, 20, 25 intro calls and build a pipeline for people that they're looking to hire.
Very cool. And definitely a gap that we see just as a recruiting firm, the earliest of stage founders being able to make that first hire. Um, and Chris, you've got a very unique background with experience on the VC and operator side of the startup world. What are some common mistakes that founders make to their fundraising strategies when they're getting started? And is there a type of approach that you would advocate other early stage founders take to fundraising?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I spent a long time watching founders navigate the fundraising process, and I have a lot of empathy for how hard it is. I think some of the difficulty, though, can be mitigated by having maybe a different framework for fundraising. A lot of founders approach the fundraising process as more of a data conveyance one. They're trying to convince the person, of why the market opportunity is big and interesting, why they're the right founding team, why their product idea is the best. And I think that's just the wrong approach. You need to approach it more like a relationship building process, more like a trust building process. It's more akin to dating, where you don't have a first date and dump your data room on the other person and show them your resume and all of these graphs and charts. No, you want to tease back a little information. You want to make sure that they're interested in you. You want to educate them about you and help them continue to want to learn more. And so the founders who did the best job fundraising approach the process like that, where they're understanding that the point of each meeting is not to convince somebody, it's to get to the next meeting, it's to continue to generate interest. And then they're also super systematic about it. I think a lot of founders don't realize just the number of top of funnel leads and meetings that they need to have. There's lots of really incredible founders that we worked with that needed to go out and have hundreds of firms, hundreds of investors in their lead list and go talk to 50, 70, 100 firms, even for the ones that were successful with their fundraise. You just really have to grind. And it's a ton of time and not so much fun, but just part of the game.
I really appreciate that perspective. And I think it's funny how often folks talk about finding the right investor is, kind of like dating and the whole idea of taking a relationship driven approach. I think that's something that resonates with anybody that's in recruiting as well. That leads me to our next question too here. What are some common mistakes that you've seen founders make around their early hiring strategies? And conversely, what type of approaches have you seen be successful for those early stage founders?
Yeah, sure. I think one metaphor I might use is one of building a brick versus a stone wall. A lot of founders, I think, approach hiring like they're building a brick
Mm,
wall, where they have a lot of different roles that are very clearly defined, and they go out looking for the perfect fit for those roles. And I think that's just not the optimal way. When you're building a startup, it's not clear what the roles even look like yet or what kind of talent you have access to. Everything's a little bit more amorphous. And so you're building a stone wall and you're looking for these broad,
mhm,
flat stones that are generalists and can do a lot of different things for the company. And then the first stone you place will determine the shape of the second stone, which will determine the shape of the third stone. And it's more about filling in gaps as you go so that you're building up your competence for these first few hires. So I think approaching early stage hiring more as a pipeline building process is really important because then you can talk to a
mm,
bunch of different kind of candidates. You can have a pile of stones as you go, and you can select the one that's a good fit with the people as you start to think about how they fit together and how to build that team. So it's less about kind of architecting it top down and making all the job
mm.
descriptions and finding the best fit. I think it's a little bit more organic, bottom up of a process.
No, I really appreciate that. And yeah, just the whole idea of it being a more organic process, I think it again speaks to the relationship driven nature and approach that a lot of founders need to take. As an early stage company and an early stage executive yourself, what do you look for in the right hires beyond just the technical skills or functional fit? And how do you know you found someone that can not only do the job, but who's going to be committed to your vision, especially in this startup environment?
Sure. It's a little trite, but it's looking for missionaries, not mercenaries. And I think that is our first
Mhm,
filter when I'm going out and looking to hire somebody. I care less about the skills that they list on their profile. Lots of people lie about skills. Skills aren't that indicative, I think, of competence, the keywords on the profile. But when somebody talks about what they're passionate about on their profile, that tends to be a lot more higher signal. And so I think that's one
mm,
filter. For example, we recently did a hiring project for a company that's building a computer science university for students in Africa, and they were going out to make their first professor hire. They had tried to find this person for 6 months. They had a really high bar and they struggled. All the professors were very happy in their academic jobs and not that interested in working for lower pay at a risky startup. But during the search process, we ended up looking for people who had some connection with their mission, some connection with that ethos, and found somebody who worked in industry but used to work as a professor at a historically black college and university, and then was also in the Peace Corps because of that. And so that you know
mm,
surfaced him as being aligned with the mission, and he's the one who ended up getting hired by the company and responded in a way that just like other candidates didn't. So I think really filtering for that is important, not just for like the success of the role, but also in figuring out like who is going to leave the security of their job, even if they're already working at a startup. They're probably working at a later stage startup. They're probably not going to
mhm.
join as employee. It still feels like a risk to join as employee one, two, or three.
No, that's great, and I think it's a great example too with the professor hire there. Especially when you're hiring someone that's been at a startup for the first time or is going to be at a startup for the first time, being able to see that history of mission-driven decision making in terms of the jobs that they've held, um, very insightful there. Uh, and so we know that Sourcing Sprints was founded and operates out of Lagos. What are some of the advantages afforded in that market to founders like yourself?
Totally. I'm a huge promoter of Lagos and the talent market in Nigeria in general. It's still very emerging, but there's a ton of potential in it. We're on the same time zone as Central Europe. People speak English here as a first language. But I'm really here because it was very easy to connect and make friends here and be part of the community. We're not in a bubble of expats. I have tons and tons of Nigerian friends and am surrounded by an extremely vibrant founder community that is filled with some of the hardest working people in the world. I was in New York prior to this and felt very home here because Lagos is a city of hustle where people have this insane ambition and drive to make it. And so there's a ton of advantages to working here because it's a bit overlooked from a talent space, there's not big outsourcing organizations here like there are in India or in the Philippines. Because of the macro environment, it's a little bit hard for those big companies to operate here. But if you're a smaller company or if you're willing to work with talent remotely, there's a ton of really smart, really hardworking, really high potential people. And we've had a lot of success with that.
And a great music scene out there as well, I hear.
That's right. An incredible, incredible music scene. Yeah, Afrobeats have taken over the world.
All right. So something that all of our viewers are interested in hearing about these days, generative AI. How has generative AI impacted your business or industry in 2023? And how do you see it impacting the business or the industry next year?
It's a good question. I don't know. I'm still figuring it out. I think, like a lot of founders are, I'm part of a small group of other founders in the recruiting space experimenting with these tools. And their feedback has been consistent that we struggle to integrate it directly into our work. I think a lot of it is not quite there yet, particularly around surfacing good candidates or even sending really
Mm.
personalized emails that stand out. But I do see it starting to impact the space where cold outreach and cold emails have always been hard and gotten harder over the years. And I think this just increases the bar of what founders and hiring managers need to do to stand out when you're reaching out to candidates. Now, by
Mm.
default, in all of our projects, we are having founders record 30 to 60-second videos pitching candidates on the role. I think other kinds of multimedia is important so that candidates know you took a little bit of extra time to craft a compelling outreach to them, and it just stands out a little bit more from all the millions of other emails in their inbox.
Great perspective there, and we're seeing the same thing on our end. It's seems like a lot of potential, but not taking any jobs just yet.
Totally.
What what's what's one piece of advice, Chris, that you wish you had received before you started your own company for the first time?
Uh, that's a good question. I think, one thing has just been like to cultivate peer founder relationships and also consider working with an exec coach. I think some of the most helpful things to me over the last few years have been frame shifts. When people, peers or coaches have questioned the assumptions that I had going into something. And that's something that I think is very hard to happen um, unless you have co-founders. I think co-founders can do that, but if you're a single founder, it's been really important for me to try and find other sources of people who can give me that kind of critical feedback. So that's something I tried to do early on and has been really helpful. But going back, I would have done that even sooner. Tried to find other founders who were on the journey and probably paid for an exec coach sooner because it's been really transformative in how I've managed myself and how we operate the business.
Great, great advice for all our founders and entrepreneurs out there watching. So really appreciate the time, Chris. So our last question: who should reach out to you and why, and what's the best way to connect with you or get in touch for our viewers?
Sure. Yeah. I love working with early stage founders, whether that be on recruiting or giving people help and feedback on the funding side of things. I'm always happy to look at pitch decks or think through investors in my network that they might want to connect with. They can just reach me at chris@sourcingsprints.com or via LinkedIn or Twitter, really anything. I'm pretty responsive and always happy to hop on a call.
Chris, thank you so much for joining. And to our viewers, please subscribe to our YouTube page to get more content like this. And check out our website, haloconsulting.com, to learn more about how we're making the best in class process of an executive search firm more accessible.
Thanks, Patrick. Really appreciate the time. It was great to speak with you.